overall inflationary pressures are easing. The consumer price inflation rate is back in the Bank of Canada's target range.
We will be reducing inflation. We will grow the economy and we will build the future of Canada.
Inflation is down 2.2%. It's for almost 2 years. It's running within the Bank of Canada's target.
The annual inflation rate rose to 3.2%. That's the highest it's been since 2023.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news. The Liberals are running out of cherry-picked metrics to hide behind from their disastrous economic policies as inflation jumped to 3.2% in May, which is above the Bank of Canada's target range. All the while, Mark Carney and François-Philippe Champagne are working to make food even more expensive. Let's take a look.
Well, Canadians got a fresh look at the cost of living this morning. Stats Canada's latest inflation report shows prices rose faster than expected in May. Mason Despatie joins us live. Mason, what's driving this increase?
Jefferson, gasoline is still the biggest story, but today's report shows price pressures are extending beyond the pumps now. The annual inflation rate rose to 3.2%. That's the highest it's been since 2023. 3.2% is well above the Bank of Canada's target 2%, but it's not necessarily a surprise as surging energy prices were expected to push the rate. Today's data shows gas prices jumped more than 33% compared to a year ago, but even when gasoline's taken out of that equation, inflation still accelerated to 2.2%. Canadians ended up paying more for fresh fruit, vegetables, air travel, and vacation packages. Food purchased from stores rose 4.3% year over year, marking the 16th straight month grocery inflation has outpaced the overall rate. And Jefferson, if we look at region by region, Alberta's inflation rate was 3.7%, so above the national average.
Okay, and Mason, energy prices playing a big part in this story. What are we seeing in the oil market right now?
Prices have eased a little bit in recent days, thanks largely due to a deal between the U.S. and Iran aiming to end the conflict and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That has quelled some of the fears about a global supply shortage. But Jefferson, economists say that the situation is still very volatile and any relief at the pumps could still take some time.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the StatsCan report. Just a reminder that this is put out by Mark Carney's own agency. So this isn't anybody partisan. This is his own government agency that serves at the pleasure of the Prime Minister's office. So Consumer Price Index, May 2026. It's always a month behind because we don't know the full extent of the current month that we're in. Consumer Price Index increased 3.2% year over year in May, up from a 2.8% gain in April. Higher prices for gasoline continued to drive the acceleration in the headline CPI in May. However, excluding gasoline, the CPI still rose at a faster pace year over year in May, 2.2%, compared with April at 2%. The CPI was up 1% month over month in May. On a seasonally adjusted monthly basis, the CPI increased 0.5%, largely due to a rise in the recreation, education, and reading and transportation components. So what does that mean? It means that everything is getting more expensive. Everything. And the narrative out there right now, especially if you look at some of these articles in Globe and Mail, which are, it's quite pathetic how much they are trying to do damage control for the Liberal government on this. It's blatantly obvious that they're doing this. And they're saying, well, you know, it's nothing to do with what's going on in Canada. This is all the war in Iran. It's all gasoline. It's all this and it's all that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the last I checked, inflation always takes into account many factors. So this isn't something new that we're doing here. There's volatility in markets all over the world. There's always been volatility in markets all over the world. That's how this goes. Now, are there wars all over the world all the time? No, not all the time, but there's usually something out there that is trying to disrupt the economy in one way, shape, or form. We've had a war going on in Ukraine. So this is just how it is. But the excuses are already trying to be built to shield Mark Carney and his government from the fact that inflation is going up under their watch. Shocker. Who could have predicted this? Oh, wait. The Conservatives predicted this. And the Liberals, time and time again, especially Mark Carney, kept telling us, oh, well, it's fine because inflation is in the Bank of Canada's target range.
Overall, inflationary pressures are easing. The consumer price inflation rate is back in the Bank of Canada's target range.
We will be reducing inflation we will grow the economy and we will build the future of Canada.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister's costly deficit gambles our future on the national credit card. And it drives up food, housing, and tax bills. Why isn't the Prime Minister breaking his word and forcing Canadians to pay higher inflation today and higher taxes tomorrow for his costly credit card budget?
Mr. Speaker, today is a good day. Inflation is down 2.2%. It's for almost 2 years, it's running within the Bank of Canada's target.
With regards to inflation here in Canada, it is lower than the Bank of Canada's target.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the target range of the Bank of Canada is between 2 and 3%. The Bank of Canada's target is 2%. So the fact that the target is 2% and we're at 3.2%, yeah, that's 50% more than what the target actually is, and it's outside the range. Let's dig into this a little bit more with StatsCan's own data. All right, folks, here is the all items consumer price index, and you can see where things are. So we are at a interesting point in the Canadian economy. You can see transportation is skyrocketing, and that's a result of the gasoline prices. That's fine. And transportation in May hit 9%. But the important thing is just about every single thing is up, except for household operations, furnishings, and equipment, because those would be what we would call non-essentials, and we can't really spend money on it when Canadians don't have the money to spend on it. But just about everything is going up in price. Shelter down a little bit, clothing and footwear down a little bit since April, but everything is still up. Recreation, education, and reading, that's what StatsCan had said. This is seasonal, so that's going to be, a little bit expected, but there's not a large portion of the economy that's actually spent on that. But food still going up, and it's still increasing month over month. This is the crazy thing. Consumers pay more for fresh fruit and vegetables, as we saw. So fresh fruit, look at that going up. Grapes going up significantly. Tomatoes going up dramatically. Almost 50%. How do you square this, right? 50% more than it was last year in May of 2025. Lettuce going up 10%. Other fresh foods and vegetables, probably around 8%. Grapes, around 24, 25%. It's insanity. Here's how it looks like across the country. Every single province, consumer price index increased at a faster pace. Every single province out there. Nobody is immune from this. So for the Liberal swing voters out in Nova Scotia, in New Brunswick, in Newfoundland and Labrador, in Prince Edward Island, I hope you're paying attention to this. Prices grow for fresh fruit and fresh vegetables in May. Prices for fresh fruit rose at a faster pace year over year in May, 5.3% on the average, compared with April at negative 0.5%. The acceleration was mostly driven by berries and grapes. On a year over year basis, prices for fresh vegetables increased 9% in May, following a 4.1% rise in April. The upward movement was attributed to higher prices for broccoli, cauliflower, tomatoes, and lettuce. Tomato prices rose 45.2% in May due to supply contractions in Mexico stemming from poor weather and a reduction in planted acreage following the implementation of U.S. tariffs. On a month-over-month basis, prices for fresh vegetables rose 5.5% in May, following a decline of 3.9% in April. This is the largest monthly May increase since 2008. That's when the last financial crisis was, folks, and is attributed to reduced supply and higher fuel costs. Collectively, higher prices for fresh fruit and fresh vegetables contributed to an acceleration in inflation for food purchased from stores, rising 4.3% year over year in May, the 16th consecutive month it has outpaced headline inflation on a year over year basis. This is where we are, folks. Remember when Mark Carney claimed that he solved the 2008 financial crisis? Well, he's in power, and this is where we are. So what do you have to say about it now, Mr. Carney? You kept telling Canadians that, well, don't worry about it, it's inside the Bank of Canada's target range. Well, it's not anymore. Oh, well, you know, this is due to fuel prices. And excuses, excuses, excuses. And if it's really caused by that, and if you're really trying to reduce fuel or food cost prices, why are you doing this?
The federal government is putting a 10% tariff on global imports of canned vegetables. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne says the move addresses the, quote, immediate challenges facing the domestic industry. He adds that the new tariff takes effect immediately and will remain in place for a maximum of 200 days. However, the government says the tariff will not apply to imported canned vegetables from the United States, Mexico, Israel, Chile, and developing countries in accordance with Canada's international trade obligations.
So let's get this straight, folks. In an affordability crisis, in an environment in Canada where there's more people going to food banks than ever, where food banks are running out of food, where people are continually skipping days without eating, Mark Carney has decided to increase the price of food when it comes to canned vegetables. What? So let's just break this down. When a canned good comes into this country, let's say it cost $1 before. That is now going to cost the consumer $1.10. Because remember, the companies that ship these goods here, they never eat the cost. The cost always gets passed down to the consumer. So, that 10 cents, where does that go? Does that go to the Canadian taxpayer? Nope. Where does that go? That goes into the government coffers. That's where that goes. So what happens when a liberal, NDP, or let's just say left-leaning government needs more money? Do they look for efficiencies and cut responsibly? No. They raise taxes in order to be able to spend more money. And that's what's going on here. So they are putting a 200-day 10% tariff on canned goods coming into this country. And they're saying, well, you know, we need to do that in order to help, you know, the local industries. Well, please explain to me, Mr. Carney, how it is cheaper for someone to make a canned good, ship it thousands of kilometers across the continent, all the way up here, and in some cases, all the way from South America, and it's still cheaper than the local farmers in Canada. Could it be that you've made it too expensive for the actual businesses in Canada to compete with external countries and businesses? Could it be? But this is Mark Carney. When Canadians need food prices down the most, what does he do? He increases the cost by putting a 10% tariff on them. Canadians, are you paying attention?